Thank you for joining us today to delve into this compelling research project. We are examining how better light economy, state agriculture yield, and the mental health influence the BMI index for data visualization, machine learning, and statistical method. Our goal is to understand that correlate to help mitigate health risks. Let's delve into our finding. Moving to the first part of our presentation, we will explore how the economic state of the country or region can influence the average BMI. Our alternative hypothesis is based on the notion that a robust economic state in a country can potentially lead to improved standard of living for its citizens, which in turn may positively influence the average BMI. Thus, we propose the alternative hypothesis. The BMI index show a positive correlation with economic prosperity. On the other hand, our null hypothesis contradicts this by asserting there is no observed link between economic standing and the BMI index.
Our example model mainly contains a random forest regressor algorithm. We perform feature engineering, converting the status column from category variable, developing and developer into a binary representation 0 and 1. Then we split our data set. 80% of the data was used for training and 20% for testing. Then we set up a parameter grid to determine the optimal hyperparameter values and explicitly use the randomized search CV. Finally, it yields a relative low mean square error with value of around 13.46, indicating that our model is quite accurate in predicting BMI. After training the model, we also observed the ranked list of importance scores for each feature. Based on the result of mock experiment, we used our trained model to predict BMI values in two scenarios, a relatively richer and a relatively poorer region. Upon analyzing and visualizing our data, we found a clear upward trend between economic prosperity and BMI. As financial standing improved, BMI also rose accordingly. This evidence leads us to discard the null hypothesis and embrace the alternate hypothesis, stating there's a direct correlation between BMI and economic prosperity. There are also a limitation of our analysis. While research CV considers all possible combinations exhaustively, randomized search CV samples a specific number of combinations. If we could have better computational resources, we may use research CV. And also using only one test setting, train test split may lead to overfitting or biased results. If time permits, the validation set will be used for cross-validation. And for the future directions, rather than using a single model, we should try out multiple better models using ensemble techniques like gradient boosting or stacking could often improve performance and robustness. If we could use deep learning models such as neural networks for regression tests, they might uncover complex patterns in the data that traditional regression models might miss.
So the second part of our study is that we want to investigate how agricultural productivities would influence the BMI index. So our null hypothesis here would be there's no observed link between crop production, specifically wheat, fruit, vegetable, and tobacco would have no impact on the BMI index.
So our data comes from Kaggle.com and the data type is structured data. We have 5 columns. So the 4 columns are the crops, which are wheat, fruit, vegetables, and tobacco. And another column is the BMI index. So we are evaluating the relationship between the crop and the BMI. And we have totally 1,446 number of observations.
So we want to find out if increase in crops is linked to a higher BMI. The traditional statistic won't work for us because our data is not normally distributed. So we are using a non-parametric method called paired bootstrapping to check the relationship. First, we use a function called Pearson correlation to see how BMI and crop yield are related. Then we create pairs of bootstrap samples for BMI and crop yield. From these pairs, we calculate bootstrap replicas of the correlation coefficient using draw BS Pearson function. Finally, we established a 95% of confidential level for BMI and crop yield and store them in the coefficient crops variables. With a larger number of resamples, the sampling distribution will more closely approximate the true underlying distribution of the larger population, which allows us for more reliable hypothesis testing. So here's our result.
So based on our pairs bootstrap analysis, we find that the data indicate a positive relationship between BMI and all of the 4 crops, specifically the correlation between vegetables and the BMI is the biggest, which lies within the range of around 0.45 to 0.54. And importantly, 0 is not included in our 95% confidence interval, indicating a statistically significant correlation in our sample.
The third part of this project aimed to study the impact of the prevalence of mental illness on BMI. Our known hypothesis is that depression rate was not correlated with BMI, and the alternative hypothesis is that there is a negative correlation between the two. This is a data set that we use, and the first thing we're gonna do is data cleaning. By checking missing values, we observe a consistent pattern indicating the likelihood of multiple data sets with similar missing value distributions. By data slicing, we can find problems in the data sets and irrelevant data to exclude them. After a series of data cleaning and integration, we can get such a table shown in the slide. These are the data distributions of BMI and depression. From this plot, we fail to observe a linear correlation. That means BMI is weakly associated with the depression rate. From this plot, we could know how the year's depression rate and average BMI are related. The result shows that the BMI and the depression rate vary a lot within each year and change differently over the years. The violin plot shows us the distribution of BMI across countries with different depression levels. From the linear regression, we could find a correlation exists between the depression rate and the average BMI. This model showed that only 36% of variation in BMI was attributable to mental health conditions included in the model. And from random forest analysis, we can also get some information. In conclusion, the correlation between depression and BMI is statistically significant. However, the weak R-squared value in both linear and multiple regression indicate a lack of strong relationship between the variables. Using random forest machine learning, we can find the bipolar disorder is the most influential mental disorder affecting BMI levels.